Okay, so welcome back to the next session, and remember in the last session we talked about how to use diagnostic tools, what are the different kind of diagnostic tools that are available, and how do we go about selecting a particular diagnostic tools, right, and how do we go about aligning internal and external environment with using those diagnostic tools. Now, in this session we will be talking about the different kind of tools and frameworks which are available, right. So, we will discuss each of these diagnostic tools, the models and frameworks for diagnosing the change. So, we proceed with the first model, is known as 6 box model, and this model was proposed long back by Weisbord in 1976. Now, if you look at the 6 box model, what does it mean? It means he talks about 6 different components of the model, right. So, these 6 categories in the model include the purpose of an organization. Purpose is why an organization exists, what for it is there, right, what it is supposed to do. Then the structure of the organization, what kind of structure it has to facilitate effective performance. Then what kind of relationship exists, right, the relationship between the people and also between the various departments and units, right. Then it talks about leadership, what kind of leadership style is there. Then it talks about the reward system, what kind of reward system it follows, and finally, helpful mechanism, what are the systems and processes it has which helps into achieve the goals and objectives, right. So, if you look at some of these components that he talked about has been explained further, like purpose. Purpose is related to the mission, vision and goals of the organization for which an organization exists, right. Say for example, a hospital, the purpose would be to provide the best quality care to the patients, right. For an academic institutions to provide produce the best quality students, right. So, the purpose of the organization, mission and goal is identified, and that is very very important, and then you need to ensure that whether this part is correct or not. Then moving to the structure part, right. The structure basically relates to the design, how the structure organization has been designed in terms of reporting relationship, in terms of the number of levels in the hierarchy, right, how many people work under who, what is the reporting relationship, right. So, all such structural aspects or dimensions of the structure is taken care here, right. And then basically the idea of a structure here is to ensure that there is a better coordination and integration of activities both vertically across hierarchy and horizontally across departments, because that is something that is helps organization to achieve its goals and objectives. Now, so when we are talking about the 6 box model, the structure is another component which is very very important, right. A structure could be based on function or it could be based on project, programs, products, anything. So, you have to see that what kind of a structure is going to be appropriate in your case, and if you find that your structure is not good, then you go for some kind of adjustments in the structure. So, you move from a function based structure, right, where people do only specialized jobs, to a team based structure, or you can move to a horizontal based structure where you can reduce the number of levels in the hierarchy. So, that there are various options which are available, and you can bring about a change in the structure of the organization, right. Then you look at your relationship part and see that how these boxes are interacting and relating with each other. Okay. Then the technology is another important component, because technology helps you to better relate and interconnect, and that is where IT comes into the picture. And then reward, both internal and external reward, and how performance is linked with the reward in the organization. And finally, you have helpful mechanism. Helpful mechanism are important, because when you are talking about these helping mechanism, this is related to what you call the management part. So, when I am talking about the management part, that is related to planning, controlling, organizing, okay, what kind of information system you had. So, these helpful mechanism basically helps you to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization. How you plan your activity, what are the control mechanism you have, right, how you allot budgets, right, what kind of IT systems you use. So, all this is a part of what you call helping mechanism, and then you have leadership. The box of leadership basically the kind of leadership style that is used, right. And finally, you have the external environment. So, you see in the previous lecture we talked about external environment being a part or a component of the model. Here external environment is a part of the model, right. Though it is not represented as a box, but it starts with the analysis of the external environment, right. Now, it is not only represented as a box, but he also identifies other things, like he identified what could be the input, what could be the process, and finally, what could be the output, right. So, he says that there could be lot of inputs that could be used, like money, machine, material, all kind of things, which are used to utilize, you can say, a process to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization, and the output could be in terms of products and services, which is required by the external stakeholders in the market. Now, if you look at this Weisberg 6 box model, you can see that how they have been arranged. Look at this. So, if you look at this 6 box model, it talks about say purpose of the organization, how purpose is related with the structure and also the relationship. So, purpose include 3 variables, that is vision, mission and goals of the organization, right. Then accordingly you are going to develop your structure. Structure is related with the reward system of the organization. Then you look into the management part, how you are going to manage the affairs, planning, organizing, controlling, these kind of things, and then what kind of interactions and relationship have been established in the organization, right. So, if you look at this model, it talks about these 5 variables. At the helm of it, at the center you will find leadership, because leadership is critical to all these things, and that is why it has been put into the center. Now, here you have created a boundary from the organization, and here though it is not a part of the model, you have depicted or the Weisberg had depicted this. This is what we call the external environment. Now, this external environment is very important, because all this what you are doing is going to be dependent on the requirement of the organization, because you are receiving your input from the environment, external environment, and you are also sending your output to the external environment, right. Now, if you look at this model, there are certain drawbacks and problems with this model. Okay. For example, here it has been identified. When you are talking about systems, they do not differentiate between formal versus informal systems. Okay. They only talk about helpful mechanism or the systems and processes that is used to produce certain goods and outcomes, right. Because what is important is that the extent to which you have formal or informal systems. If you have very formal systems, that does not help, right. And if you have only informal system, that also does not help, right. So, part of the system could be formal, part of the could be informal, right. So, both the formal and informal systems, if they are not close to each other, then it affects effectiveness of the organization. And that is why it is said that if there is a larger gap between the formal system and the informal system, then effectiveness would be less. What I mean to say by formal system is that following a proper formal process to do any task or activity, bypassing the chain of command or the hierarchy, right, then it becomes more informal, right. For example, if you want to get a job done, you can go through the informal processes, informal systems. You can directly ask the concerned person to do the job, or if you are going to follow a formal process, then what actually happens, that you need to follow the proper structural system to send the information to get the things done, right. So, both are followed. If there is a big gap, then it brings less effectiveness. If there is less gap, that is always good. Then you need to see whether whatever systems you follow, you are able to do the job, that is more important. Now, both should be allowed at equal pace, whether you are going to follow a formal system or an informal system. Another important thing, that is the extent to which there is a fit between the environment and the organization. Now, what I am talking about it, that this is the organization part, and this is the environment part. What is more important is that whether you have been able to identify and scan your external environment in terms of identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and accordingly you have identified what is your goal and objective, what kind of structure would be required for that, what would be the role of leadership, what kind of interaction system, what kind of management processes you have. So, all this is based upon the analysis of the environment only, right. As another fact is that yes, your input is also coming from the environment and output are also going to back to the environment, right. So, if there is a discrepancy between the way the organization functioning and the way it should function, actually organization should function depending upon the requirement of the organization environment. So, because it has to meet the requirements of the external environment. So, if it is meeting the requirement of the external environment, it means there is less discrepancy. If it is not able to meet the requirement of the organization, there is a more discrepancy. Say for an academic institution, I am taking up this example. Suppose I want to explain that okay, the kind of students we are producing, right. We are getting everything from the students are coming from outside, we process them, right, and output is a pass out student. Now, this pass out student whether is able to work effectively in the organization or not, that is very, very important. So, whether we are creating students or we are developing the capability of the students as per the requirement of the external environment, say industry, which is a part of the external environment. If there is a greater discrepancy, it means we are not ready to serve the environment better. And that is why it is said that you need to create a better fit between the organization and the environment. So, any academic institution for that matter must produce students who will fit into the external environment, who are going to work for the organization and who find themselves capable enough to be considered to work in any kind of industry, right. If it is not the case, then what happens? There is a lot of discrepancy between the existing organization and the way it should function, because you have not been able to function properly to ensure that you are meeting the requirement of the external environment, right. So, this is one model that has been used extensively by the practitioners. Now, we move to another important model, and so this is well known model in the literature, which is known as McKinsey's 7S framework. It has been developed by McKinsey and Associates. Now, if you look at this McKinsey model, what is the basic objective or basic component of this model? Now, if you look at this, it talks about 7 components, which starts strategy, structure, system, which is depicted in violet color, and then this is the light green color like skills, shared values, style and stuff, right. And now, why we call it 7S framework? Because each of them starts with letter S, right. So, there are 7 variables which need to be taken care in this framework, and this is a very useful framework that has been used by the industry to analyze where they need to go for a change, whether there is a need to go for a change in the strategy, structure, system, leadership style. This is the shared values, that is basically representing the culture part, and whether the people are the capabilities part, right. Now, you see that all of them are interconnected or interrelated. What does it show? That it shows that you need to not only just look at a particular component, but also look at the entire or all the variables of the system, because see how the strategy is going to affect. The strategy is related to this one, strategy is related to this one, strategy is related to this one, this one, this one and this one. So, each component is connected with all other components in this framework, right. This is a very important framework, and if you look at some of the components of this framework, this includes systems, that talks about the processes and procedures which is followed within the organization to perform the job. Then staff, what kind of people you have, right, the engineers, managers, workers, all kind of categories. Then skills, skills basically talk about the capabilities of the people, the knowledge and skill base, what kind of competencies people have in the organization. And then style, it talks about the leadership style, what kind of leadership style is being used by the management to achieve the goals and objectives. For example, whether they follow a democratic style, a participative style, a charismatic style, right. So, there are different kind of leadership style which has been discussed in the literatures, right. So, the managers, how they behave, it means how they influence people to get the job done, because the basic objective is to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization, right. So, style is very, very important. Then the shared values, this refers to the culture part, right, that whether people share common values and the intensity of these values, and that makes the culture of an organization very, very strong, right. So, whether you are able to derive meaning out of it or not, right, and whether organization members share the similar values or norms, if that is so, it means the culture is strong. Then the structure part, I have already talked about it. It talks about the reporting relationship, vertical and horizontal coordination within the organization. And then strategy, which basically provides a plan of action, and it also determines what the direction of the company, where the company need to go, right. Now, if you look at this model, you will find that the 4 variables, that is skill, style, staff and shared values are considered as soft variable, while others are considered as hard variable. Now, if you look at this, that is why if you look at this part, strategy, structure and system, right, this is considered as hard variables, while this are considered with soft variable. Why this is considered soft? Because it is related to people aspect and this is related to structure aspects or system aspect, right, and that is why this is considered as hard aspect, while this is all these 4 variables are considered as soft aspects, and that is what I have been talking about here. When I am trying to define these 7 variables and the interconnectedness, right. So, here what I mean to say is that when we are going to follow this McKinsey's 7 S framework, we need to identify and explore each and every variable and see how they are connected. So, if you are able to identify that the problem is the style or the shared values, then how it is interacting with other variables and what needs to be done or what kind of action need to be taken in order to ensure that change is successfully implemented. Now, moving from McKinsey's 7 framework, the next that we are going to discuss is the STAR model. So, if you look at this, it looks like a star, it has 5 components, right. The strategy, structure, process, people and reward. Now, you see that in Wiesberg 6 box model, he was able to identify how many variables? 6 variables or 6 components. In McKinsey's 7 S framework, he was able to identify 7 variables, but in this model they have been able to identify only 5 variables: strategy, structure, people, reward and process, right. So, you also see that how these variables are related with each other. So, all of them are interconnected. So, a strategy variable, that is the first component. Yes, as I have already talked about, a strategy is related to what? The direction, in which way the organization is about to proceed or should move to maintain its competitiveness. Then the structure basically a reporting relationship in the organization, right. So, whether the power is centralized or decentralized, it depends upon the number of levels in the hierarchy, right. Then moving to the people part, right. People basically how the information the people part basically is related to how we are looking at the HR policies. You also look at the knowledge and skill set, the mindset of the people, right. Then the reward part, which is basically used to it is linked with the performance, and the reward is basically used for what? To motivate people to perform better, and the processes, the systems and other things, right. How the information flows, what are the various kind of managing processes like planning, organizing, coordinating, budgeting, these kind of things, the various processes which are adopted. Now, you see that all these parts are interconnected with each other, right. So, if you look at this model, this framework is more or less similar to other frameworks. The only thing is here that some of the components are not here, like culture is missing from this component, right, which is very, very important. Because if you want to bring about a change in people related aspects, you also need to bring about a change in the culture. but that is missing. But this is with all the models. All these models you can say are not fully perfect. There are certain drawbacks of each of these models, like in Wheatstone model we have seen, in McKinsey's 7 frameworks also we have seen there are certain drawbacks, and similarly this model also has certain drawbacks. Now, moving further, if you look at the other models which are more comprehensive are known as congruence model. It was developed by Nadler and Tishman. Okay. So, this model is different compared to what you call the other component models that we have just discussed, like Weisberg 6 box model or McKinsey 7S framework. Now, if you look at this model, this is a different model compared to other models. The idea here is to identify what is going wrong within the organization and how to fix it, right. Though it could be objective of any of these models and frameworks that we have talked about, right. And he identified 4 elements or 4 components which could be related with the performance, because so the performance is the ultimate objective of this particular model. Now, if you look at performance, he talks about 4 elements, that is task, people, structure and culture. And he says that if there is a better congruence, more compatibility among these 4 components, there would be higher performance of the organization. So, what exactly he did? He tried to relate these 4 variables with each other to ensure better organizational performance. And if there is less compatibility or there is incongruence, then you need to go about changing the design. And if you go for changing the design, it means all these factors would be modified, right. Now, let us look at this model. This is that is how it looks like. This is the congruence model. So, it starts with the strategy. He does not consider the external environment. He is only considered about the internal alignment, right. So, he wants to see that there is a better congruence among these factors. I am not going to describe it further, because I have already explained what these components are, like what is structure, what is culture, what is work processes, what is people related aspects. So, you can see that all this is derived from the strategy of the organization. So, once you are able to identify your strategy, right, which could be in terms of competitiveness through pricing, differentiation or anything else, then you move further and then accordingly identify what kind of culture would be appropriate based on this particular strategy, what work processes you are going to identify, what kind of knowledge and skill that you require among the people, and what kind of structure is required. So, you need to go for a better alignment between these factors based on the strategy of the organization, and this would help you to see that your performance is good. So, more compatibility, greater performance, less compatibility among these factors, bad performance, right. Now, if you look at this congruence model, which talks about performance based on these elements, right. So, he made certain assumptions about it. What are these assumptions? He considered organization as open social systems. You know what an open social system is. It means you are receiving your input from the external environment, you process it and then you have an output. So, you have input, system and output, right. So, system is more important for him, and he considers that okay, you are a part of the larger environment, you are there to serve the external environment. So, you need to ensure that you are meeting the requirement of the organization in order to perform well. He also says that organizations are dynamic entities. Dynamic entities means that there is a need to bring about continuous change in the organization based upon the requirement of the organization, because since organization is changing and you become a part of the organization. So, you also need to change accordingly, right. Then he says that behavior occurs at the individual level, group and the system level, right. There is no denying the fact that yes, in an organization we have behaviors at the 3 level, at the individual level. We will talk about people aspects like their perception, their personality, their attitude, their motivation. Then group behavior, how the group is behaving, right. So, here we talk about say how the group functions, right, how they take decision, how they manage the conflict, right. So, these kind of things are related to what you call the group behavior. Then coming to the organizational behavior, this deals with what? The structure part, what kind of structure it has, what kind of culture it has, what kind of technology it has. So, it is related to the structural aspects, right. Then since he is talking about an open social system, he also considers input system and the output part, right. So, input, you are receiving input from the environment, your system which basically processes that input, and finally, you have output, right, in terms of production services, effectiveness of the organization, right, performance of the organization, or on the individual level also can have certain inputs, whether people happy or satisfied while working in the organization or not, right. So, this input model basically considers all these activities. Now, you see that how these components are related in this model. So, these are the 4 major variables elements of this model. Here it is strategy and here it is output at different level, the individual level, group level and individual level, right. So, the output also varies at the organizational level, it could be performance of the organization, productivity, market share, group level, better teams, individual level, people are happy, motivated and satisfied. So, that could be the outcomes. Now, in order to achieve these outcomes, you need to start from here, right. Since you are receiving your input from the environment, right, and your strategy is dependent upon the kind of environment that you are operating in, right. Like you need to identify your external environmental factors, those factors of the environment which are going to influence, and then accordingly you are going to develop your strategy. And here this is the system part where the transformation is happening, right. And this transformation part we will talk about the individual tasks, organizational arrangements, the processing systems and both the formal and informal, right. So, how they interact and relate with each other. The idea is to transform that input into an output, right. So, if your transformation process is not compatible and aligned with each other, then you will not be able to expect the outcome which you desire. So, it is very important to ensure that based on your strategy, you are going to identify the process through which you are going to transform the input into an output. And then you can also see that there is a feedback loop here. The idea of this feedback loop is that based upon your output, if you want to modify your resources, your strategy, you can bring about a change. Based on this, you can also bring about a change in the arrangements, formal and informal organization. That is why you will find the input is coming from here, the input is coming from here, the input is, and also the process providing the input, the resources, right. So, that you get input at every stage to correct and modify your behavior in order to produce well, right. And basically, if you look at this, this shows what? How the various components of this model are interconnected, right. Now, apart from this model, we are going to discuss next important model, that is basically performance and change model, which is known as Burke-Lehtinen model of organizational performance and change. Now, when we are discussing these models, one thing that you need to keep in mind that most of these models are basically talking about different components and variables and the interconnectedness and relationship among these variables. So, it was originally proposed by Lifton and others, and then it was refined by Burke, and that is why it is known as Burke and Lehtinen model, and it identifies several key features and include 12 theoretical constructs or variables, right. Some of the major distinguishing features include he differentiates between culture and climate. He also distinguishes between transformational and transactional dynamics, we will talk about it, and also specifies the nature and direction of influence of these variables. Unlike other models where it is very clear, in this model you will find a difference. Now, if you look at this, how does it happen? What are the 12 organizational variables in this model? This include first external environment, second mission and strategy, third leadership, fourth culture, fifth structure, sixth is the management practices or systems, then systems is another variable, then work unit climate, because that is where we differentiate between the culture. He said the organizational culture is something else, and there could be a subculture which he calls work unit climate, the kind of culture that exists within the unit of the organization. For example, in IT we have a culture in organization at the macro level, but at the macro level different departments might be having their own climate, right, or culture. Then the task requirements, the individual skills, the motivation part, the individual needs and values, how it is going to be met, and then the performance, both the individual and organizational performance. Now, external environment is considered a input to the system, and individual and organizational performance is considered as the output, right. Now, so if you look at this, this model includes both external environment as a part of the model, right, and also the individual and organizational performance considered as output, and it also is also considered as a part of the model. Now, if you look at this model, it is something like this: external environment here, because everything is derived from the external environment, and performance is here. Now, in addition to that, you also see there is a feedback loop going to the external environment from everywhere, right, and these are the 10 variables which are part of the main component, which includes your mission strategy, leadership, culture, system, management practices, work group climate, structure, capabilities of the people, that is skill, job, match, motivation, and needs and values. And you can see that the direction is also clear. For example, you can find out the culture is related to the individual needs and values. So, you will find both one sided arrows and two sided arrows. So, this one sided arrows basically shows the nature of direction, that is it is unidirectional, it is not bidirectional. While if you look at this, it is bidirectional, like individual needs and motivation are interconnected, skill and motivation is interconnected, but skill is related to performance, performance is not related to skill, right. So, some of these arrows basically represent the nature of relationship, whether it is unidirectional and bidirectional. Even if in this model you can identify that some of these variables are transformational in nature and some of them are transactional in nature, right. So, if you look at this part, this is transformational and this is transactional, right, which looks into the market, which looks into the efficiency of the organization. So, both are included. Now, we proceed further to discuss this model to identify what are the transformational elements of this model and why we call it transformational. So, the 4 variables external environment, leadership, mission, strategy, culture and performance are transformational, because the objective of having this is to ensure that you remain competitive in the market, right. They are going to transform organization, so that the organization is able to grow and compete in the market. Now, if you look at these variables, they are transactional because of the nature, because here it is something like where you are going to transact within the organizational system to perform well, and that is why this kind of system is considered as what you call transactional. Look at this, this is transactional. This transactional system is also contributing to performance, this system is also contributing to performance. So, this part is considered as transformational, this part is considered as transactional, right, because the nature of interaction is going to decide whether it is going to be transactional or transformational, right. So, after discussing this transactional model, we are going to discuss the last model, that is the life cycle model, right. Now, this model is different compared to other models, because it talks about how organization progresses through a series of development stages, and each stage brings about certain changes which need to be managed. Now, if you look at this, you can see that first stage is the growth stage, that is where you need more creativity. Then the next stage is growth through direction, it means that you are expanding. Then the growth through delegation, if you further grow, then you need to create a structure and need to empower people, because you cannot do everything on your own. Then again you need more and more coordination, and finally, you need collaboration. Now, if you look at these various stages, it also creates a lot of crisis. First stage is the crisis of leadership, then autonomy, then control, how is going to control various activities. Then you need to ensure that there is a crisis between bureaucracy and coordination. So, what kind of structure and system we are going to use to ensure that this red tapeism is reduced, the bureaucratic hurdles are not there, because red tapeism is related to bureaucracy. So that you can grow through better coordination of vertical and horizontal systems, right. And finally, when you go through collaboration, you have to identify what kind of crisis would come. So, what I am trying to say here is that if you look at the various phases of growth, you encounter different problems, issues and challenges, and all of them could be related to the change, right. This is not a perfect model of change, but to say that okay, at different stages of development of the organization, you need to bring some changes in the structure, system, process and culture, so that you continue to grow and develop, right. So, with this model we are going to end this discussion. Okay. Thank you very much.